A few years ago, I had dinner with a man worth somewhere around 8 figures, and he spent a good chunk of that dinner explaining why he still buys the store brand olive oil. He wasn't joking. He'd done the math. The good bottle was about $4 more. He went through two a month, and over 30 years that difference, invested instead of poured on a salad, came to a number that genuinely made him happy to keep buying the cheap one. I sat there thinking, this man could buy the olive oil company, and he is choosing, on purpose, to live like someone who clips coupons. That was the night it clicked for me. The people who quietly hold real money are not doing anything clever. They are doing the most boring things imaginable, over and over, for decades, while the rest of us go looking for something more exciting. That's the trap. The rules that actually build stealth wealth are so dull that almost nobody follows them. They don't feel like progress. They don't give you a hit of anything. They're slow and repetitive and slightly annoying, which is exactly why they work, and exactly why they stay invisible. So I want to give you the actual rules. Not the habits, not how the rich carry themselves at a restaurant. The rules. The boring, mechanical decisions that separate the people who keep money from the people who only ever pass through it. There are 6. The 6th one is the one almost nobody has ever actually sat down and done, and once you do, the other 5 stop feeling like deprivation and start feeling like a plan. Stay with me for that one. Rule 1. Pay yourself first, then forget the money exists. You've heard "pay yourself first" 1,000 times, which is the problem. It sounds so familiar, you nod along and miss what it actually means. The version on the motivational poster says you should have the discipline to save before you spend. That version is useless because it asks you to be disciplined a dozen times a month for the rest of your life. Nobody has that. I don't have that. The person you think is more disciplined than you doesn't have it either. The real version has nothing to do with discipline. The money moves out automatically, on payday, before you ever see it, into something you've made deliberately annoying to reach. Then you forget it's there. That's the whole rule. You delete the decision, because the moment a decision exists, you'll eventually make the wrong one. Not always, just often enough to matter. Here's why so few people do it properly. When you automate your saving and ignore it, nothing happens. There's no feeling. You don't get to be proud of yourself because you didn't do anything. The account just grows in the dark while you live your life. And for most people, that emptiness is unbearable. They want saving to feel like an achievement, so they do it by hand, feel good for a month, and quit the first hard week. The boring people win because they made saving feel like nothing. They turned the single most important money behavior into background noise, and background noise doesn't quit on you. Rule 2. Run every purchase through a 10-year question. When most people think about buying something, the question is, can I afford this? Wrong question, because the answer is almost always yes. You can afford almost anything once. That's what credit is for. The entire economy runs on the fact that you can technically afford this right now, as long as you don't think about next year. People who hold wealth ask a different question, and they ask it about everything. In 10 years, will I be glad I bought this? Not next month. 10 years. It sounds simple. It's brutal, because almost nothing survives it. The new phone because the old one feels slow. Gone. The bigger car when the current one runs fine. Gone. The renovation you want mostly because the neighbor did theirs. Gone. The 10-year question kills the impulse before it becomes a purchase, and it does it without you having to feel deprived. You're not telling yourself no. You're asking a longer question, and the longer question answers itself. But it doesn't always say no. Sometimes it says yes, loudly. A coat you'll wear for 15 years, a tool you'll use every week, something that changes what you're capable of earning. The wealthy aren't cheap, and I want to be clear about that, because cheap is its own trap. They're precise. They spend real money without flinching on the few things that pass the test, and almost nothing on the enormous pile that fails it. The reason this stays rare is that 10 years is an uncomfortable distance to look when the rent is due Friday. And that discomfort is the whole game. Hold that thought, because we come back to it. Rule 3. When your income goes up, your life stays the same. This is the rule that quietly destroys more wealth than any other, and it does it to the people who are doing well. Not the ones struggling, the ones who got the raise. You've watched this happen to someone. They get promoted, income jumps 20%, and within 6 months their spending has jumped 20% too. Bigger place, nicer car, better restaurants, longer holidays. They're earning far more than a year ago and saving exactly the same nothing. They just upgraded the whole stage set of their life and called it success. It has a name: lifestyle inflation. It's why you can find people earning $400,000 a year who are one missed paycheck from panic, same as someone earning a fifth of that. The number on the check grew. The gap between earning and keeping didn't move. The rule stealth wealth families follow is almost offensive in how simple it is. Income goes up, lifestyle doesn't. The car stays, the house stays, and the entire raise, every dollar, gets sent toward assets before it can turn into a new, permanent expense. Old money doesn't upgrade. Old money accumulates. That's the whole difference in one line. New money sees a raise as permission to live larger. Old money sees it as fuel. The reason almost nobody does this is that it asks you to give up the best part of earning more, which is getting to enjoy it where people can see. Keeping your life flat while your income climbs feels like working harder for nothing. The people who can sit inside that feeling are the ones who, 10 years later, are quietly free. Rule 4. Own boring assets and never the exciting ones. If you could watch a stealth wealth portfolio scroll past on a screen, the main thing you'd feel is boredom. Index funds, a couple of properties collecting rent, cash sitting somewhere safe and dull. That's most of it. No coin somebody mentioned at a party, no hot stock that tripled last quarter, no private deal a friend of a friend swears by. This is hard to follow because boring assets are boring to own. For long stretches, nothing visible happens. The index fund doesn't call you with good news. The rental just sits there being a building. There's no story to tell at dinner. Meanwhile, the exciting assets come with a story attached, and the story is the actual product being sold. The guy who tells you about the stock that went up 400% leaves out the 4 other bets that went to zero, because those don't make a good story. You only ever hear the win, you never hear the record. Here's what the boring money understands, and it took me years to feel it instead of just know it. Compounding looks like nothing is happening, right up until it looks like everything happened at once. For years, the dull investment grows so slowly it's almost insulting. Then, out past year 10 or 15, the curve bends, and the growth in a single year starts to dwarf everything you put in at the start. The boredom in the early years is the price of admission to the part where it gets absurd. Most people quit during the boring part because the boring part feels like failure when it's just the cost. Rule 5. Buy it once. There's a rule that runs through how the wealthy spend, and it's almost the opposite of how the rest of us shop. Buy it once. Most people, without deciding to, end up buying things 3 or 4 times. They buy the cheap version because it's cheap. It wears out, so they buy another cheap version, and another. Over the life of the thing, they spend more replacing the cheap option than the good one would have cost at the start. They felt frugal every single time, and they spent more than the person who bought once and never thought about it again. The wealthy buy the good coat. One coat, worn for 15 years, still right at the end. The reliable car kept for 12 years instead of leased every 3. The furniture that outlives the room. At the register it costs more, sometimes a lot more, which is exactly why most people walk away from it. The bigger number feels like the expensive choice, even when it's the cheap one spread across a decade. And buying it once buys you something the receipt doesn't show. The end of thinking about it. You're not back in the store next year. The decision is closed, sometimes for life. The wealthy guard their attention almost as carefully as their money. And buying things that last is how they stop bleeding small decisions all year long. Rule 6. Know your number. This is the one almost nobody has ever actually done, and it's the one that makes the other 5 mean something. Here's the question. What is the amount that would make work optional for you forever? Not rich, not a yacht, the specific number that, invested and producing income, would mean you never have to earn another dollar to keep your life running. That number exists, it's calculable. For most people, it's far smaller than the fantasy figure in their head, and they've never once worked it out. The stealth wealth crowd knows their number almost to the dollar. They know what their life costs to run in a year. They know roughly what a safe portfolio returns. From those 2 things, they know exactly how much they need to be free. And that changes everything, because once you know the number, every choice stops being about whether you can afford something. It becomes one question. Does this move me toward the number or away from it? The new car isn't, can I afford the payment anymore? It's, this pushes my freedom back 14 months, am I sure? Spending suddenly has a real cost you can feel because it's measured in time, in years of your own life, instead of dollars that feel abstract. That's why I saved it for last. Every other rule sounds like deprivation without a number. Pay yourself first, freeze your lifestyle, buy boring assets, ask the 10-year question. With no target, that's just a smaller, sadder life for no reason. With a number, every rule turns into a lever you're pulling on purpose, because each one moves the date you get to stop. And I think I finally understand why people avoid the math. As long as the number stays vague, you never have to face how far away it is, or admit that some of your choices are pushing it further out. The fog is comfortable. A lot of people would rather keep the fantasy soft than trade it for a hard target they'd actually have to walk toward. So those are the 6. Automate your saving until it feels like nothing. Run everything through the 10-year question. Freeze your lifestyle when your income climbs. Own the boring assets and let them be boring. Buy things once and know your number, so all of it finally has a point. Look at that list and notice what's missing. No trick, no secret, nothing a clever teenager couldn't understand in an afternoon. That's exactly why the rules stay rare and why the people who follow them stay quietly wealthy. The rules aren't hidden, they're boring, and boring is its own kind of lock. It keeps almost everyone out, not because they can't find the door, but because the door is dull and the room behind it asks you to wait 15 years. The Stoics had this 2,000 years ago. The person who can't be moved by the promise of pleasure or the fear of going without is the only one who's genuinely free. Marcus Aurelius ran an empire, and the discipline that let him do it wasn't inspiration. It was doing the unremarkable thing every day when nobody was watching and there was no applause for it. The boring money rules are the same discipline, just pointed at your bank account. They don't ask you to be brilliant, they ask you to be steady, when steady is the least exciting thing you could be. That's the part nobody wants to hear. We want wealth to be a moment, a win, a story. It isn't. It's a long, quiet act of patience that pays off so far in the future that most people give up long before they see it work. But the ones who stay boring, who hold the line while everyone around them chases the exciting thing, end up with the only luxury that ever mattered: the freedom to stop. If this gave you something to sit with, drop the words "boring money" in the comments. It tells me you made it to the end, and it tells the algorithm to show this to someone else who needs it. Subscribe if you want more, and I'll see you in the next one.